That's why the threat narrative and national security and safety of flight is where you start with. You can't jump straight to this. That's why the age of disclosure didn't really bring any new big revelations for those of us who are paying attention, because the rest of the world, a lot of it is still kind of stuck in this zombie mode with scrolling through social media, and they don't realize how much more to this existence there is.
What percentage of your knowledge on this topic do you think you have revealed so far?
Probably 5, maybe 8% of what I know. I've been able to discuss.
So there needs to be a campaign plan to synchronize all this, a benchmark-driven process with specified occurrences and timeframes.
But each year, it goes higher and higher. There's more and more and more percentage.
Even with that, we're kind of preparing the U.S. population, at least, and the word got out within the government that they're showing up in 2027.
Forget all that nonsense. It's nothing to fear that people have been led to believe. Your government has everything under control.
In April of 26, there would be an alignment. And when that happens, it would mark a shift into a new knowledge, not an apocalypse.
Well, is something coming that we don't know about? There's a huge consciousness shift that everybody's psychic. Like, what are you saying?
No, I'm not saying anything more.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are already deep into controlled disclosure. The question is, who is behind it? Who is orchestrating this? Who was the Age of Disclosure documentary really for? What was its purpose? Why was it hidden behind a paywall? Why is disclosure leading with this national security UFOs are a threat narrative? How far has the legacy program in their reverse engineering efforts been able to get? And do we really have a secret space fleet? What is the actual endgame of this carefully constructed narrative? Does it all lead to an upcoming event in the next year or two that so many people have spoken about? Let's go.
There's footage and records of objects in the skies.
UAPs are unexplained, it's true, but they are real.
I think that there is a link between human consciousness and the phenomenon.
Greetings, beautiful people, fellow citizens of the planet Earth, and welcome to the Lucid Lens. Now, before we begin, I am not declaring I definitively know what is going on with the machinations of the deep, dark secrets and all the things that are transpiring behind with disclosure. Look, I am merely presenting the facts. I'm connecting it all for you, and I am finding a very interesting narrative forming. So take what I present as not the truth, because the truth is something that transcends everything we're all seeing, but as an invitation to dig deeper. All right, with that down, let's get started, because this is going to be a wild ride. Let's set the stage. The establishment of the secret-keeping apparatus. All right, let's go back to the 40s. The government realizes we're not alone. And this was right after World War II. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of urgency to maintain this power and control that the United States found themselves in. So we had Roswell, we have Aztec, we had the Magenta crash in Italy, all around the same time period. Let's just say the 40s to be general. So the legacy program was formed. The CIA and Air Force were formed right after Roswell. The Atomic Energy Act was put into play in 1946. All right. Not too long after that, the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951 came into play. A way for the government to kind of sequester and hide away anything with anti-gravity, which may be popping up. Because in 1956, we had magazines saying the G engines are coming. This was all over the news. The 60s, we had the rise of the Jetsons and flying cars and the promise of this amazing future we were all going to partake in. But then suddenly, anti-gravity goes dark. Did they solve it? Did they just give up on it? Yeah, I don't think they gave up on it. Who would give up on it? You're the world's superpower with basically unlimited amounts of money and research, and you throw everything you have at the problem until you solve it. And as we'll find out, I'm pretty sure we solved it. So in the 70s, the government begins experimenting with consciousness and exploring psychic abilities, a la Stargate project with Hal Puthoff that we know about, and I'm sure there's been other black projects that we've never heard about. Not long after that, in the 80s, the U.S. Army Intelligence and the CIA take a trip to the Monroe Institute to attend Monroe's Gateway Voyage training program. This was to strengthen their remote viewing assets. In 40 years, the government had learned quite a bit about the nature of reality and our place in the universe. And if you're not aware that this goes much further than just UFOs and technology and flying saucers, I would invite you to go check out my documentary, which really kind of goes into the nature of reality and the true reason all this is secret. And even my last video, I kind of go into some of the science on this, and it's all very credible. It's a lot of research has been put into this stuff. Okay, so according to Dan Farah on his interview with Joe Rogan, the Legacy program is massive. We're talking over $1 trillion since the 40s. Thousands of people are working on this.
100% has to.
Everyone I've talked to who's aware of the details of the deeply hidden legacy program says that it's at least over $1 trillion spent since the 40s.
Oh my God.
It's an enormous amount of money.
Oh
and
my
it's a
God.
much bigger program than people would suspect. You're talking thousands of people, full-time jobs, then going home to their families. The guy sitting next to your kid's Little League baseball game. You know, normal people on the outside are involved in this deeply hidden program. It's bonkers.
So that's enough resources, personnel, and time to figure things out, right? And also enough time to come up with a long-term plan on how you might want to disclose this information to the general public. But why would they disclose? Couldn't they just keep this a secret forever? No. There's many reasons why they can't. So let's see. A lot of people are saying, oh, we need to disclose because we're getting behind China and Russia. We need our brightest minds on this. We need to bring academia and science into the fold. We've already figured this out because, as we'll get to a little bit later, we likely already have cracked some of this technology at least and have a secret space program. Okay. We've had thousands of people working on this. It's not a small, tiny little program. We've had a lot of people working on it. So we don't necessarily need more resources on it. And Hal Puthoff went into how they built in recruiting to the Army training regimen where they would be able to pull psi assets. We already know about the GATE program, which has been making the rounds the last few years. They've been targeting children for their psychic abilities. And I'm sure they've been recruiting straight out of various universities in any area of science or research they would need. So getting personnel, even with the stigma of the subject and related subjects, high is not an issue. Okay, so it's not a matter of we need more minds on the problem. They are smart enough to figure out how to get people to work on it. I guarantee you they found people to work on it. So the rumor keeps growing that we have a secret space program. Dan Farah said, we have a fleet after speaking with sources that he had vetted by a Congressional Intel Committee staffer. Matthew Brown came forward naming the UAP umbrella program Immaculate Constellation. What stood out to me the most about that was not only was the program scanning for UAP, but also ARV. And if you're not familiar with the term or the acronym ARV, that's Alien Reproduction Vehicle, aka the ones that we're building, the ones that are flying around, presumably the triangles and possibly even the Tic Tacs, maybe some other shapes we decided to pull out of the geometry bin there. The term ARV was first popularized by aerospace illustrator Mark McCandish in the 90s, but has been more recently leveraged by Dr. Stephen Greer, founder of the Disclosure Project. And Greer and others for many years have insisted that many of the UAP we see today are actually the property of aerospace corporations such as Lockheed Skunk Works, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and others. However, there's much more data acknowledging this. Ben Rich, I'm sure you've heard of Ben Rich, the second director of Lockheed Skunk Works. He has said many things over the years that could be taken as tongue-in-cheek, but let's read through some of these quotes because they are right on the nose. During a lecture at the UCLA School of Engineering Alumni Association in 1993, seems like a pretty serious venue, Ben Rich ended his presentation saying, "We already have the technology to bring ET home." During that same speech, he also stated, "There was an error in the equations, and we have figured it out, and now know how to travel to the stars, and it won't take a lifetime to do it." If that wasn't enough, after the presentation, Rich made a statement to 3 Disclosure Project witnesses that these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Approximately 1 week before Rich passed away, he spoke with aviation expert and aerospace historian Jim Goodall, who reported that Rich told him, "Jim, we have things out in the desert that are 50 years beyond what you could possibly imagine, or what you could possibly comprehend. If you've seen it on Star Trek or Star Wars, we've been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort." What are we talking about? I mean, matter manipulation, being able to create, food, healing beds, med beds. I mean, Star Trek and Star Wars. Anyway, so take all these with a grain of salt. But in the grand scheme of things, they're pretty on the nose. And if you look at them in the greater context of everything else we're about to get into, maybe Ben Rich wasn't mincing his words, and this was kind of just a little drop to get us started. Between 2001 and 2002, British systems administrator and hacker Gary McKinnon famously hacked into the US military and NASA. And he supposedly came across not only photos of UFOs, but a document called Non-Terrestrial Officers. This file allegedly contained a list of names and ranks of individuals assigned to an off-world military program. He interpreted this as evidence of extraterrestrial collaboration or a secret space program, of fleet-to-fleet transfers, suggesting interstellar logistics operations. The document also mentioned names of ships which he believed were part of a space fleet, although the specifics of the craft were not detailed. Just this year, Army Secretary Dan Driscoll told Fox News an astronaut is currently on the moon. The exact quote was, "We talked to an astronaut yesterday who's on the moon, who's a soldier." Was that a slip? A miss? Who knows? But he said it, and it's out there. Now, how advanced is the Legacy program? Are we interstellar? Are we visiting other star systems? When you realize, especially now with Dan Farah, who spoke with very credible people, I think this is everything he's putting out has been vetted. And he's saying we have a fleet that we're at least traveling the solar system with, which is just mind-boggling. And yes, there's questions of, well, if we're doing that, then why do we have NASA? And why is the regular government just acting all, coy and dumb to all this? Well, there's a few reasons. The regular government, well, it's not a monolith. We have 2 parties that don't agree. We have people within those parties that don't agree. The elected officials that we see on TV and who represent the government, they're not the people actually running the government. The federal government has millions of employees. Marco Rubio even said in the documentary Age of Disclosure, it's the people 2 or 3 levels down, the people who aren't appointed to these positions by the president, who are running things. They're the ones who are there for 30, 40 years, the career officials. So even within that, you likely have factions who don't agree on things, okay? There may be a faction that doesn't want this coming out, that has the Collins elite who believe these are demons and this should not be, brought out to benefit humanity. So we can't, say the government as one entity. It's many different entities. It's made up of people. If you've ever worked in a large company with, in one department, you may not know what's going on in another department unless you need to know about it, right? Stuff happens in parallel. That's what they call the stovepiping effect, where you've got folks working on one aspect and they don't need to know about this. They just need to do their job over here. But there might be a very small subset who does actually know what's going on in all the areas, and they can kind of all pull it together to bring a narrative forward. Okay, so NASA, The main government doesn't know we have a secret space program. It's hidden from them. All right? There's a lot of stuff that the elected folks have no idea of. The deep state that, Trump harks on about, yeah, it's probably a real thing. That's probably what's going on behind the scenes. But anyway, why disclose? Well, the government, I'm doing it now, the government, they knows they can't keep the secret forever, right? Plus, we have potential contact events confirmed. Holloman Air Force Base was more or less confirmed in the Age of Disclosure film. So there's possible agreements that even David Grusch has hinted at. He's been asked, I think, a couple of times in his interviews, and he said, well, that's not something I can get into. The other thing is public technology, the private sector, things that we all have access to. The technology is getting pretty good that we're able to capture things. We're learning about things in the public sphere that are allowing people to do CE5 and bring their own craft in. I mean, there's an element that they must know that they can't keep this secret forever. They can't hide the reality of reality from the population forever. So elected officials, they're not part of this controlled disclosure narrative. We've got the DOPSR process, which Grusch, Elizondo, James Lacatski, all these folks, Jay Stratton has gone through this for his upcoming book. They have to go through this process, right? Now, the powers that be could shut any of these things down at any time they want. We've already had Lacatski saying that, I go to them and a little bit more. Each time I'm allowed to go a little bit further. He's admitted he's basically part of this controlled process. Lue Elizondo has already said he's only spoken to 5 to 8%. This was just last year. 5 to 8% of what he knows. That's not a lot. There's a whole lot more. So who was the Age of Disclosure for? Well, it's a safe place for the media to come in to this next stage of disclosure. We have the National Security Advisor, Secretary of State, and acting archivist for the National Archives, Marco Rubio, one of the most powerful people in the world right now. And it's very interesting. He's holding those three. I think he had a fourth position at one point. He's at least still got the Secretary of State National Security. I think also acting archivist for the National Archives, which is very interesting because the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023, which initially half of it passed, part of that was getting all the agencies and contractors and military branches to send everything to the National Archives. And Rubio was Gang of Eight. He was the head of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. He knows probably more than anyone else that we know in the public. At least he's up there. He knows a lot. So it's getting people like him to be a safe, olive branch for the rest of Congress to engage in this, the rest of the public to start talking about it openly without as much stigma. We already seen the news coverage, CNN, ABC, Fox. They're all covering it very seriously, doing great write-ups. I mean, of course, the podcast scene and YouTube, everyone else has, been talking about this. But it's the mainstream that basically gives permission for everyday Joes. If it's on their favorite news station, they're allowed to talk about it with their friends. All right. So, adversaries likely know we already have this secret space program. That can't be a secret. If we know it as everyday people, then of course our adversaries are aware of this. So why all this posturing? Why this charade with the public wars and the bickering between the nations? Are they just putting on a political theater for all of us? Is that the distraction? Maybe. So remember Matthew Brown, whistleblower Immaculate Constellation. He said we live in a carefully constructed reality. And there's kind of two aspects to that. The nature of reality, the kind of bigger, more philosophical look at this, but also the reality of what we, the collective consciousness agrees upon what is the nature, what is like really going on in the world, what's the truth. And that has been carefully managed, presumably since the 40s and 50s. And we know that public opinion has been influenced and persuaded since the Church Committee uncovered, 400 deeply embedded journalists in every single major newspaper and network in the 70s. So we've known that we've been manipulated since the 1970s. And yet people just kind of forgot, and they still kind of take what they see as gospel, and they raise their kids, and this what we're seeing is true. And it's probably disheartening to be like, well, we're being lied to right to our faces, but what are you going to do, right? So not everybody may be privy to the legacy program's grand plan. But here's a hypothetical. By telling people we need a plan for disclosure, a la Carl Nell, who now has presented the plan 2 or 3 times at Seoul, the NDAA, which has a controlled disclosure plan in it. By telling people we need a plan for disclosure, that means there is something to disclose. So just on that means people are going to start paying attention. Be like, our officials are telling us there's something here. We need to start paying attention. So whether or not the plan is real, or the plan that's being proposed is real, or it's going to whatever, it doesn't really matter. The fact that all these really highly reputable people are saying we need a plan means people are paying attention. There must be something there. So that's why Age of Disclosure was created, to provide an on-ramp for the mainstream and media and the politicians and general public to have a safe space to talk about this and move us one step forward, right? Get the base facts out there, get that acknowledgement. But why isn't it free? Why can't I just go on Netflix or Amazon Prime itself? Why do I have to pay for it on top of my Prime subscription? Well, that is a great question. Farah addressed this in his Rogan interview. All the streamers and studios were excited when they screened the film, but none of them offered to pick it up. Why would that be? Are they allergic to money? More views? No. A few well-placed phone calls from the government or somebody to persuade them not to, go forward with picking this up. But why would they do that? There's a plan here, right? I'm saying there's a plan. Age of Disclosure is part of it, but why would they not want it to just be out on blast where everybody could watch it? Well, they do want things to come out. Remember Dan Farah in that Rogan interview said there's black helicopters circling outside of one of the interviews. They're watching. They know what he's doing. And yet they allowed him to continue doing what he was doing. But they're just saying, yeah, we see you. They could have stopped him at any point, but they didn't. So by forcing Age of Disclosure to be of limited availability, a smaller subset of the population is going to view it. And all that does is kind of control the slow dissemination of the information, right? Yes, news is talking about it. People who, like me, I of course I got it and watched it and with family and talking about it with friends and everything, but by making it behind a paywall, and not by Dan Farah's choosing, I'm sure he wanted to blast it everywhere, but due to, circumstances outside of his control, it wasn't able to be that. So that's why, why do I have to pay for this? If they want everyone to know, they is not they, you know what I'm saying? There's different people involved here. There's different factions that are it's a tug of war, basically. They want information to come out, but only at the pace that they set. Okay, so why do I not think this is a New World Order type of disclosure? It's not Project Bluebeam. Well, it's controlled because non-human intelligence and technology is just scratching the surface of what is going to be revealed. Remember what former CIA official Jim Semivan said An insider described the truth as indigestible to him. It's not something we're going to be able to fully grasp as a whole. It's something that, will be ontologically shocking to a lot of people. And I think this is only going to be ontologically shocking to very material, scientifically kind of close-minded to metaphysical philosophies people, right? Mostly those in the West who have kind of, if you've seen any of my other videos, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Elizondo, who a small vocal minority online has issues with him. And yeah, he's had some missteps, and perhaps part of the whole charade of slow stepping this. Do we question him? Is he really telling the truth? Well, if it wasn't for him and Christopher Mellon, I wouldn't be paying attention at all to any of this. I would have, the 2017 New York Times article wouldn't have happened, and disclosure wouldn't be anywhere right now. Okay, but that doesn't mean it's not, necessarily going to be something bad at the end of this. Elizondo talks about threat equals capabilities versus intent. There's this whole threat narrative and safety of flight issue. Well, if you stigmatize the entire world to believe that all of this stuff was nonsense and tinfoil hat wearing, crazies that talked about this, how do you slowly walk back on that and get people comfortable talking about strange things they can't explain in the sky following our planes around? Well, you make it about safety of flight. We need to identify whatever these things are. We're not saying what we know what they are. We need to identify them so we're not having near mid-air collisions. That's why they kind of led with the Navy fighters, because they're very reputable people. That's why we started with this threat narrative, because it could be China, it could be Russia. We don't know who's flying these advanced craft around the world without impunity. It's obvious that it's not any human actors doing this, but that's the safest way to get people to pay attention. That's what got me paying attention. When I saw David Fravor, I'm like, holy crap, this guy saw something that was not of this earth. So that is why the threat narrative has kind of started. But it's not just that, right? So that the threat narrative issue is what kind of gets people to pay attention. You're like, what is this? Is this another nation? Maybe not. But Elizondo has already taken the first steps into the consciousness side of the phenomena. He's already spoken about some of the crazy stuff with orbs and remote viewing. Eric Davis, the astrophysicist, who has talked about, a lot of this stuff. He's talked about beings and also what he thinks the underlying, nature of the universe is, which is built upon information, which, is called Fisher information. And I get into this in my documentary, but it basically, it's the foundational layer of reality that everything else arises from. Hell put off, consciousness, Stargate, remote viewing programs. Okay, there's a lot of these guys who are already kind of dipping into the woo, saying, pay attention to this stuff. And I hate using the word woo, but it's what people are familiar with, they resonate with. James Lacatski. All right, and here's kind of the nail in the coffin. If this was a blue beam situation where they wanted us to give up our freedoms and be fearful and rally under the one banner nation, why would Lacatski, out there being given sanctioned disclosures, be talking about human potential, consciousness, and to stop worrying about the nuts and bolts? He wouldn't be promoting how powerful we are as individuals if they wanted us to be weak and surrender our freedom to a one world government. Do you see how that does not fit the narrative? They would be poo-pooing on all that stuff. Okay? But instead, we have Elizondo with consciousness and quantum and weird things, and they're prepping us for the deeper conversations that are going to follow. Okay? That's why, yes, Lue is playing a psychological game with all of us, but because he's having a slow step through this, and he has to be evasive in a lot of these interviews, and he can't get into a lot of this stuff yet. The general public, you know what, maybe more people are ready than we realize, but I think they have determined that the general public needs to be slow step through this. Yeah, we're getting frustrated with the pace of it. A lot of us who have been following this and have done the research, yes. But there's a method to the madness. All right. Now we come to Paul Hellyer and Haim Eshed and where they fit into this. So Haim Eshed, former head of Israel's space security program, 3-time recipient of the Israeli Security Award, and a current professor, a very serious, accomplished person. He gave an interview in December 2020 to the Israeli newspaper Yediot Ahronoth, I believe is how it's pronounced. And in this interview, this is what he claimed. A galactic federation of extraterrestrial civilizations has been in contact with the US and Israel and other nations for years. Not all the governments of the world know. There's a group of partners, Americans, Russians, Japanese, British, and Chinese, who are coordinating not to reveal this. And the Galactic Federation asked them not to reveal it. They agreed to some kind of publishing embargo in exchange for a variety of advanced technologies like anti-gravity, which Eshed claims we currently possess. He said the Federation didn't want to make direct contact until humans understood in general what space and spaceships are. Well, I think we're already kind of at that point now where we're learning what space is. And I think when he means space, or when they meant space, we're not talking about like space out there. We're talking about like space-time, like what reality is, which is just a holographic projection from consciousness, okay? And if you want to call it God, if you want to call it the universal field, whatever, it doesn't matter. And spaceships, well, we're getting some of that, the warp bubble effect where, perhaps these craft are just creating their own space-time capsule where it's different inside than outside, and it's powered by either zero-point energy from the quantum field, or it's using quantum entanglement to basically wireless electricity to power it from other locations. So they gave us kind of a little bit, but there's been a lot of different things with like the Casimir effect, where we can pull energy from the quantum vacuum fluctuations. There's Salvador Payas has patents from the Navy with electrogravitics. There's a lot of stuff going back. T. Townsend Brown, Tesla, just name dropping stuff for you to go look at if you're not familiar with it. But anyway, so there's a lot of stuff that has been out there. So we kind of understand reality's not what we think it is. Spaceships aren't the old traditional rockets, even though NASA's still using them for some reason. All right. The government's agreed to some kind of embargo. All right. Also, he said that, the aliens have prevented the Soviet Union from striking back against the U.S. with a nuclear weapon after the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba. In fact, he says aliens track all nuclear activity and prevent nuclear wars from erupting on Earth. And they have underground bases on Mars that house both humans and extraterrestrials. And there's been so many stories that talk about bases all over the place. And we've heard about recently the deep underground bases, all over the US and perhaps the rest of the world. And if we do have a secret space fleet, I imagine we have bases on moons and planets and who the hell knows where else, right? Then we get to Paul Hellyer, former Canadian Minister of National Defense, and he made several statements basically aligned with Haim Eshed. I think Eshed went a little bit further, but he claimed multiple species are visiting Earth. The governments have been in contact with them. As much as 80 different species have interacted with humanity. And we made time agreements with your leaders as to when your people would be made aware of our presence. In the past, humans have been harmed to prevent these secrets, but we had no part in this. So, okay, we have agreements with China and Russia, but I thought we were in a Cold War with them. That might be a bridge too far for some people, but you got to remember, it's not our elected governments that made these agreements. It's the shadow government legacy programs that apparently went international Because why wouldn't you reach out to other governments at the time and then put all this stuff in the deep black? Because this is a global, humanity-wide, issue. You can't hide this from other countries when they're seeing the same stuff and things are coming down in different places. And we have potentially different factions of non-human intelligence engaging with each other. We've had Ryan Graves and Gary Nolan talk about dogfights where they're, two different crafts engaging. Could it be our own craft with a not so friendly faction or two non-human factions? I don't know. But it would explain why, Russia wanted to launch nukes at us at the same time they have an agreement with us, because not all of the government, remember, it's not a monolith. The government of Russia has a black side like the US government does, and those apparently are working together behind the scenes. So this is so much more complex than people even realize. It's not just the government over here is doing this no, there's like sub-governments and departments and things. It's just so much, it's like this crazy spider web behind the scenes that people have no idea. All right. So, yeah, and in the past, humans have been harmed to prevent these secrets. And this, I guess, at least the Federation saying they had no part in this. Well, I mean, obviously that remains to be seen. We still don't know. There's, just stories at this point. But hey, it could be factions of the legacy program that are conducting what's called my labs, and staging alien abductions. Who knows? When you're able to manipulate conscious perception and you understand that, whether it's a human agent doing that or if it's a non-human agent, it doesn't matter. You could appear, you could change the memory, you can swap the experience for one that you want them to remember. So when we get into this crazy, magical sounding technology, again, Star Trek and Star Wars, anything's on the table, right? All right. So we have this separate government in public from, the career officials that are behind the scenes, as Rubio described in the film. We have this massive, well-funded apparatus with technology we can scarcely imagine, in conjunction with help from apparently, this federation that's preventing massive wide-scale conflict and war. And you have to imagine, the technology they have, even without the help, is decades ahead of what's in the public, right? So look at where AI is in the public. Look at where quantum computing is in the public that we know about. So think about what kind of quantum AI the government has been sitting on, like maybe Project Looking Glass. Look that up too if you're not familiar. To look at the state of the planet and human consciousness to see where we are in this process and to adjust accordingly. They can control the revealing of information and the pace of disclosure. It would not be difficult for them to look at all these variables and in real time adjust on the fly. Something comes a little too fast, well, you throw something out to discredit it. It's the tug and war that keeps this on whatever pace we're marching towards something imminent, as Lue Elizondo would put it. So there's a time element, as Lue Elizondo has hinted at, and there's been a manipulation of public perception to manage this time element as we're kind of coming up against it, right? So, there's evidence that disclosure is controlled beyond what we've already talked about. The Podesta, Tom DeLonge emails where they admitted that this campaign to bring the government and military, back into a positive standing with the population. A lot of people I see use that as like, oh, well, it's a bad, disclosure's bad. They just want to do it for X, Y, and Z. Well, when you've had all the bad stuff that has gone on with the government and all the scandals, and over time, our trust in our institutions has eroded to like nothing. Like nobody trusts any of this. So yeah, they probably do have to do more manipulating because they went so far in this direction. They got to manipulate us back into good standing because they don't want riots. They don't want the systems to collapse. They want this to hopefully be a smooth transition to something. Yeah, I don't like being manipulated, but I do see where they're coming from. The question is, what is the end game? Where is this all leading? Because people have been hurt. Why aren't they preventing all genocides, right? They prevent some nuclear war. Why are they letting some atrocities continue? I mean, help the poor nations who don't have access to basic needs. And so, and this, I mean, this goes for, the NHI, because they're helping us in some ways, right? But maybe it's just a matter of free will and kind of letting this young species kind of figure things out on their own. Maybe there's certain things they can kind of help with as they realize we're like on the cusp of, interstellar travel and really kind of scraping up against the nature of reality. So there's an aspect of reality that will be revealed that will probably explain these motives we still don't yet understand. Remember what Jim Semivan said: indigestible, something we might not be able to process, something more ontologically shocking to a big portion of the population. And it's all more than nuts and bolts, as James Lacatski would say. And that brings us to this, the upcoming event that everyone's talking about. The father of quantum mechanics. Let me set the stage a little bit here. Max Planck. He said, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We can't get behind consciousness. Everything we talk about, everything we regard as existing, postulates consciousness." What is he saying? Consciousness is fundamental. He's saying our soul, our spirit, our essence, the informational value, whatever we are underneath this, holographic projection, is fundamental. That's the real reality. Matter, physicality, our bodies and everything else we see in the universe, that is derived from the underlying layer of information, consciousness. This is Max Planck, father of quantum mechanics. The Planck length, who he basically, the resolution of our simulation, right? As Nikola Tesla said, "The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than all the previous centuries of existence." And we are there right now. But another rational voice just threw their hat in the ring. Kirk McConnell, former senior staffer for nearly 40 years on the Senate Armed Service and Intelligence Committees. A very grounded, reputable person who behind the scenes was listening to direct firsthand witnesses and whistleblowers. He was involved in Senate investigations into UFOs and UAP, and he has helped craft legislation that's been coming out for the last, 6 years now? Here is an excerpt from Matt Ford's Good Trouble show regarding the statement that McConnell just provided.
"There's more than one significant recent development, in my opinion, that warrants acknowledgement. Another is the release of the Telepathy Tapes, which adds to the already hefty weight of evidence supporting the reality of so-called paranormal capabilities, which are a central aspect of the UAP story. The evidence of nonverbal autistics conducting rich interactions telepathically lends support to the reported experiences of so many people communicating with intelligent non-human beings telepathically."
So here is a grounded, credible individual acknowledging the reality of the revelations from the telepathy tapes, the deeper capabilities humans possess, and the fantastical structure of reality. This is all 100% part of the secrecy. Lue Elizondo has mentioned he's aware of this event that's coming, but he can't comment on it. He's not ready to go there yet. Former CIA official John Ramirez has spoken about 2027, and he recently confirmed it's things that he's heard from channelers and the spiritual community. Okay. Chris Bledsoe has spoken about this upcoming event that will share a new knowledge with humanity. Dolores Cannon has described a consciousness shift, a global transition to a higher dimensional new earth, a process she believed was driven by humanity's collective spiritual awakening. This lines up with the law of one material. If you're not familiar with that, go read into it, and what they call 5D ascension. Some call this the shift, spiritual ascension, raising our vibration, enlightenment, the return of the Christ consciousness in Christianity, the divine feminine energy, as Jake Barber described, that he connected with. The names don't matter. It's the collective awareness of humanity realizing there is something more to this reality, that we are something more. And throughout the ages, we've all been experiencing this reality, interacting with these various non-human intelligences. And just because one tribe over in Africa interpreted it one way and gave it this name, doesn't mean the same underlying reality that happened over in, Native American tribes where they describe things happening. It's all the same reality, guys. We can't draw a line and say, oh, you have your gods over there and you have your gods over there. No, a lot of these gods are probably just different non-human intelligences at various levels of, consciousness, right? Some probably even lower than us who maybe poorly influence us without us knowing it. And others that are higher that are trying to lift us higher because maybe they see the potential in us. And when I say us, we're just inhabiting these meat suits right now, but maybe, some of us are star seeds that have lived other lifetimes in other planets and grew our consciousness to the point where we wanted to come to this, Earth school and, take the final exam. I don't know. Jordan Crowder just did an excellent video on Bob Monroe of the Monroe Institute, and Thomas Campbell, who was a nuclear physicist, he worked for NASA for a bit, and they talked about this event as well. Monroe called it the big event. Campbell called it the gathering. And this is the gathering of all the non-human intelligences around Earth right now to witness this event. It's why they're all here right now. Yeah, they probably jumped up in activity maybe in the 40s, 50s, or maybe that's just the perception of our technology being able to more easily detect them. Who knows? But they're all here to witness this upcoming event. So when Bob Monroe was having an out-of-body experience, he asked one of the non-human intelligences he was interacting with. He said, I noticed there's many other groups gathered here also. What is your relationship to these other groups? I asked. We are mostly all members of an intergalactic group. You might call it a federation. There's also some loners who came here on their own to observe these events. They are not members of our federation, but are welcome to be here to observe. So many of these beings are physical. Some of them are not physical. Maybe they have kind of ascended their physical containers and they're just pure consciousness. I think consciousness is just a ladder that we continue to climb. Some of them are playing an active role, preparing and helping humans along. Maybe providing, little nuggets of intuition or insights and pushing us in the right way. They say the event is a rare occurrence. It's the conflux of several different and intense energy fields arriving at the same point in our time-space. It's a once in 87 million Earth-year event. It's a rare event that attracts a lot of attention. The conflux of these energies is the birth of a new energy. They want to observe how this plays out as it offers human consciousness a rare potential to emerge rapidly into a unified, intelligent energy system that'll range far beyond our space-time illusion, creating, constructing, teaching as only a human-trained graduate energy can do. Man, is our universe magical or what? What are these energies? Well, if everything is consciousness, and we've hearing a lot about, even the planet, our sun is conscious. I mean, the stars make up 99.999 infinity% of the universe, so they're probably conscious. I think even Roger Penrose has spoken about the stars being conscious entities. So everything has energy, right? Everything pretty much just is energy. Another Tesla quote, energy and vibration. So the convergence of all these energies, the collective conscious energy of humanity kind of coming to this realization all at once, like, holy crap, what is going on? Why are we even here? There's so much more to this existence. I'm sure you've got some, Earth cycle kind of stuff. You have alignments and cosmology. You've got the sun cycle, various energies converging. I'm just kind of guessing. I don't know what those energies are. But we have, I left this comment on Jordan's video. I said, we have agency in this matter too. We're not just bystanders in someone else's story, like the watchers, the folks that came here to watch this event. We chose to be here too, whether some of us remember that or not. But it's up to us who are aware to choose unity over fear and to encourage those around us to see that choice as well without impeding on their own free will. I mean, what are the chances that you just happen to be alive here in the most exciting, pivotal moment in human history? I mean, think about it on the cosmic scale, over billions of years. The fact that you're alive at the moment of, the accelerating change that humanity's facing right now with technology, open contact, consciousness, physics, the craziness that is happening in the world right now, it's a once in a species event. This convergence is singular. This will never happen again for humanity. We won't discover the nature of reality again. No. This stuff happens once. We won't realize what the unified theory of everything is again. We won't learn that we're not alone again. This moment happens once. That's why we're here. That's why they're here. They're all here to watch this. It's not a coincidence. And I always, as a kid, I questioned, I was like, why are we here? Why is there something rather than nothing? I mean, I'm sure not everyone, but a lot of people ask the same, philosophical question. Why are we here? I'm like, why are we here right now? Perhaps it's because we're always here, right? If this is just a temporary meat suit we're walking around in and we're just a, eternal conscious soul that's jumping around the universe and having different experiences, why wouldn't you want to experience this? I mean, this would be crazy. And that also kind of explains maybe why, some of these bad decisions that were made, from our perspective, because we don't know the full truth, right? I mean, we're starting to get a picture of it, but they're killing people, they're lying, they're ruining people's lives. But if you know that we're all eternal beings and there's this big consciousness shift coming, maybe people will forgive after that. I don't know. It would certainly explain why they, if they're, truly are the good guys behind this, in control of this, why they would be able to sleep at night, having done some of the terrible things that they've done to keep this secret. I mean, that would certainly explain it. If you know what's going to happen, if you know that someone's not really dead, that their energy lives on, and that they are probably just, watching on, or however time works on the other side, right? Who knows? So I never believed in prophecies, but maybe that word's just become tainted over time because I was never very religious growing up. I was open to all possibilities. I was definitely more scientific, I believe, and I started to open my mind up over the last couple of years to this whole conscious, spiritual side of reality that I never really paid much attention to. And I'm kind of mad that I didn't much sooner. But it doesn't matter at this point. When we have so many just credible people from all walks of life coming to the same realizations, the same conclusions, it's not a coincidence. I do think some kind of event is coming. Remember the studies in the last video I did with Pair Labs, global consciousness studies? Our conscious thoughts impact physical reality. Consciousness is what controls the physical world. So it's entirely possible that if enough of humanity comes to realize that this is an illusion, the illusion breaks and we all graduate to the next stage. Whatever happens, I'm along for the ride, and I'll continue to do my part raising awareness, talking to friends and family and approaching everyone where and meeting them where they are in their journey through life. Not everybody's ready to hear all this, right? This is the deep end. This is the end game, right? That's why the threat narrative and national security and safety of flight is where you start with. You can't jump straight to this. That's why the age of disclosure didn't really bring any new big revelations for those of us who are paying attention, because the rest of the world, a lot of it is still kind of stuck in this zombie mode with scrolling through social media, and they don't realize how much more to this existence there is. Anyway, what do you guys think? What is this event? Do you think it's set in stone? Do you think it can change? Do you think it's all a psyop? I mean, seriously, I'm open to anything, but I'm just observing all these various things happening, and yeah, let me know what you guys think. Drop a comment down below if you enjoyed this. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and yeah, be good to yourselves and each other, and I'll see you on the flip side. Peace.